The federal Liberals will acclaim their candidate in Vancouver-Granville tonight. Talib Nur Mohammed will carry the party banner in the riding that was held by former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould. She won the riding decisively 4 years ago, but is now running as an independent. Wilson-Raybould resigned from cabinet in February over the SNC-Lavalin revelations. She accused the Prime Minister and his top officials of pressuring her to drop an attempted prosecution of an engineering firm. Wilson-Raybould and former Health Minister Jane Philpott were both banished from the Liberal caucus back in April. Yes, right. Now, Jody Wilson-Raybould has national name recognition, but Talib Nur Mohammed and the other candidates enjoy a big advantage. And lawyer Asher Honickman is here to tell us all about that and why it's a problem. He is with the firm Matthews Abogado and in the studio along with me is the CBC's Hannah Thibodeau, who is part of our Canada Votes team leading up to October. All right, so Asher, let's talk a little bit about this because this is interesting, right? Yes. Because right now, before the writ is dropped, before the election campaign, as it stands, if you're a member of an established federal registered party, you can raise funds, but if you're Jody Wilson-Raybould running as an independent, you can't.
Well, you can raise funds, but you can't issue tax receipts, and that's a big disadvantage because I would say most people who give to politicians do so because they know they're getting one of the best tax receipts, maybe the best tax receipt you can get, where I think you get something like 75% of the money back up to a certain amount, less after that. So basically what that does is it allows party-backed candidates to effectively raise more money than independent candidates. In the case of Jody Wilson-Raybould, there's an added issue, which is that all the money that she has raised over the last few years through her riding association is now there for the benefit of Mr. Nur Mohammed.
So that's in the Liberal Riding Association in Vancouver-Granville.
Exactly.
Now, you say this is a constitutional issue.
Yes, and I'm representing MPP Randy Hillier. We're challenging the similar...
In Ontario?
In Ontario, we're challenging the similar provincial law. And the position we're taking, and the reason I submit this is unconstitutional, is because Section 3 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the right to vote. And the Supreme Court has said that's not only a right to cast a ballot, that's a right for every citizen to meaningfully participate in the process. And that means that the government, Parliament, the legislatures cannot elevate some voices and marginalize others. So if we imagine that there was some law that said, yeah, everyone's allowed to vote, but only Liberals or only Conservatives are allowed to do advertising. Obviously, that would be an unconstitutional law because you're privileging some people at the expense of others.
So that sounds like, I mean, what you're laying out there, it does seem to be an unfair playing field.
Absolutely, and I want to be clear. Were we to level this playing field, we would still see, by and large, party candidates winning elections. And that's a good thing. Parties bring stability, they bring order, they are a way for people to sort of centralize their ideological beliefs. That's all a good thing. But we also need independent voices. And even if the playing field were leveled, we would still see majority party candidates winning, but we would see some independents winning. And that's important in a democracy, especially when we see MPs being whipped the way they have been. There's very few really legitimate independent MPs who are part of parties. Scott Reid of the Conservatives comes to mind, Nate Erskine-Smith of the Liberals comes to mind. But by and large, we see MPs voting along party lines. Independents bring true independence.
Now,
to the
what
process.
is Elections Canada saying about this?
Well, I mean, Elections Canada applies the statute, and the statute is very clear in terms of who can raise money when and who can issue receipts. So they're just applying the law. So this unfair disadvantage is not something that's systemic. It's not something that is just sort of happening. It's written into the law. That's really the problem with it, and so Elections Canada will apply that.
And how big of a difference would you see for someone like Jane Philpott, Jody Wilson-Raybould, your MPP you're representing at the court? How much of a difference would you see in them fundraising? Oh,
it's huge, and especially it's not going to matter quite as much for Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott as it will for Randy Hillier, because the next provincial election is not till 2022. So for the next 3 years, party-backed candidates can already be raising money every year up to the maximum per person, whereas Mr. Hillier won't be able to start raising money until the writ is dropped in Ontario.
For 30 days, basically,
Exactly.
more or less, 35 days.
Exactly. And so there's a huge disadvantage. That's why we see most of the independent candidates in Parliament or the legislatures are candidates who were part of a party and got kicked out. We don't see many independents running for election and winning. It has happened. It doesn't happen very often.
What's interesting about this, Asher, is there are smaller parties like Maxime Bernier's People's Party of Canada, the Green Party. They have two MPs, so they're more advantaged than the independents as well.
Yes.
Just because they're members of a party.
Even though they have the same numbers.
Yes, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, there are good arguments to be made that large parties have advantages over small parties. For example, in terms of what they're entitled to be reimbursed for expenses, that sort of thing, yes. But even small parties have major institutional advantages over independents.
When you think of an argument before you go to court, you need to know what the other side is going to say.
Yes.
What is the other side to this?
The other side to this is that the party system is integral to a functioning democracy. It is what we need, is what we've always had. You need conservatives, liberals, NDPs in order to have any semblance of organization, in order to form cohesive governments. My response to that is we absolutely should have that, and we will have that even if the playing field is leveled. We're not asking for special treatment, we're only asking for equal treatment.
But what would you say to the argument that it'll dilute the whole party system that we have, and that we'll have a bunch of independent MPs that are elected? We won't be able to run the country, there won't be a government that can run the country properly.
I don't think that's going to happen, because I think by and large, and this is anecdotal, but I think by and large, most people want to vote for political parties because they know that is the best chance of their voice being carried out into policy. So I think even if we level this playing field, again, I do think we're going to see still a majority of politically backed candidates, party-backed candidates winning. The other issue is just that how many independents are really going to run, who are going to have any kind of name recognition, like Jody Wilson-Raybould, like Jane Philpott.
And when you head to court, when do you get a ruling on that?
Well, first we've got to exchange our evidentiary records, so we're going to be sending them affidavits. They're going to be sending us back. It's a long process. Right. It's not like US TV, where the trial happens the afternoon after someone gets arrested.
So
maybe the next election.
So this obviously your representative is for the provincial election in a few years. This would have no impact on the federal election happening in the fall. That's too fast a timeline, right?
Exactly. So we're not going to get into court until after the federal election has been held. But it will be interesting to see what the results are from that election, and that could certainly play into how the court looks at Mr. Hillier's application.
Potential big implications for federal as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Asher, thank you very much. Asher Honickman,
Thank you for having me.
Honickman is a lawyer with the firm Matthews Abogado, and the CBC's Hannah Thibodeau, who's part of our Canada Votes team, joining us in studio.